I have no slides today. I'm doing a little social experiment where I'm using no slides because I figure over the last 2.5 years, I have looked at my monitor more than ever. Actually, my eyesight got worse significantly. I noticed it. So I tried no slides today. I also bought some physical books. I'm reading 2 poems from books. It's a little different. Also, it's my very first time coming back to a physical event ever since the COVID started. I'm used to seeing only 49 people at the same time. So this is a little overwhelming for me, honestly, actually. You think I'm joking, I'm pretty nervous. It's also nervous when your face is this big. So today I'm going to talk about something that I feel is not talked about in our industry as much. And when I look at my team of a little over, it's over 150 folks, so product managers, engineers, designers, data scientists, and so on, I noticed in engagement surveys and different cuts and slices, their tenure, location, one thing is different about them is the generational divide. And when I look at my team, as example, the majority of my team are millennials, followed by Gen X, then the Gen Zs are just starting. And I know many of you probably don't think about yourself as what generation am I in, so I'll define them real quickly. Mic test, is it working? Yeah? Okay, it is, so I can't hear myself. So real quick hint, how many of you are in Gen X, which is defined if you're born 65 to 80? Okay. Hey, Gen Xers. Okay. Next is millennial. Will be, okay, majority, you guys don't even wait for the year. Okay, all right, that's fine. I see, the eager generation. 65 to 80 is I'm an old millennial, just for the record. I was born in 82, just turned 40. So I'm an old millennial. Actually, by the way, in Gen X, oh sorry, millennial, I was wrong. 81, 96. I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong thing. But Gen X, I was going to say, there's a few notable folks, in Gen X. We got the Elon Musks of the world, Shaq, Sundar Pichai, Jonah Peretti from BuzzFeed, Gen X, Tiger Woods, Kanye, or Ye. And millennial, there's quite a few notables: Beyonce, Serena Williams, LeBron James, Mark Zuckerberg, Taylor Swift. And then we have Gen Z. How many Gen Zs are in the house? We have 97 to 2012. Oh, wow, a few. Okay, hello, future. Welcome to the present. I have 3 kids. Actually, my oldest daughter is just at the cusp of Gen Z. She's 9 years old. She's actually the old Gen Z, if you will, in the future, which is pretty wild. And my 2 other kids, age 7 and 5, are going to be in the generation they call Generation Alpha. I guess, it's a loop, ZA, and so on. Well, what's interesting about this, there's actually a few motivations why I started looking at this, not only about engagement surveys, looking at my team, but also over the last 2 years, I had made a COVID move from New York to California to help with my in-laws. And they have since moved in with us. So now we have a 3-generational household between boomer, I guess old millennial in this case, and Gen Z, actually maybe Gen Alpha as well, so maybe 4 generations. And I definitely noticed over the last couple of months since we've been together that having more positive role models in the house has really affected positively my own kids. The way they interact, what they learn, how they communicate. They're happy, have more connections, more stable during this period of very unstable times. So that got me interested. And the second one, you guys can probably all relate to, is there's different words for this, the great reshuffling, the great resignation. I personally like to call it the great reflection. Because the last 2 years or so, I guess probably 3 now, has given us more challenges, especially I think for managers. I really have respect for managers. You guys have managed through a lot of crises. Actually, my last talk is about all the crises. I'm glad I'm not talking about crisis this time. But both crises, but also a lot of opportunities. Many people took the opportunity to reflect on what their values are, what their priorities are, what they want to do in life. They moved away, moved back home, moved out of their parents' house, moved back with their parents, new kids, and so on and so forth. And that really got me interested. I started realizing the life stage, I can see actually by data, just with my team itself, has a huge factor in how they make decisions on motivations and their needs, and therefore how we can work with them. And the last thing is a little thing I'll throw out there. It's also not talked about as much, but I think maybe Gen Xers and old millennials can relate to a bit more, is the concept of ageism. Discrimination against age, or for me, it's less about discrimination, but just misconceptions. When you get older in your 40s and your 50s, I talk to my friends, many of my friends are much older, some of them are in the 50s, and some of them are actually in the 60s. And when we talk about our life and the season that we're in, some of them are a little beyond the current season, they often question about their value over time. What's my value now? What's my value in the future? And as I entered my 40s myself, I want to think more about what is my value in the workforce, what's my value in my family, what's my value in life in general. So I think that's maybe think more about generational sense. So really, I want to cover a few things. I'm looking for time. Oh, I see time here. Sorry, I should look down here. A couple of things. One is, it's very clear that the generations are quite different. If I had a slide today, it would be a very messy matrix across different dimensions, across generations. I think I'll save you that. There's a few clear differences. First and foremost, technological and communication styles have completely changed between the Gen X and the Gen Z. I'll go over real quick, just on some of the characteristics real quick, because there's not a whole lot of time. Gen X, you guys are known for the MTV generation. It's actually very interesting when I was doing more research. The latchkey generation, because both your parents are most likely working. You probably get home from school. You go home by yourself, you wait for the parents, you turn on the TV. This is a generation that, because they've been left alone, they're more independent, more resourceful, more creative, self-reliant. They're known to be tough. Now, these are more stereotypes. I know there's a lot of different variations. Also, there's negative attributes. They're also being known to be skeptical and overly critical. And from a work culture perspective, this is almost the first generation where the work-life balance is very important. There's a good phrase where they work to live versus live to work, which is actually really interesting to think about how they also gone through a lot of challenges in their own lifetime. 1980 is a recession, dot-com bubble in 1999, the Great Recession in 2007, and 2009, of course, the COVID and so on, and what we are experiencing. Also, the entertainment is very different. MTVs, mixtapes, Sony Walkman, the rise of video games. So we have you guys to thank for the rise of video games. I'm sorry. Apologies. It's my own phone. I was waiting for the Uber, and I didn't want to miss. So sorry about that. And the millennials. Millennials is fascinating. So we have the resourceful, creative. The millennial comes in. They're also known as Generation Me. When you first look up what are millennials known for, the first couple ones are fairly negative. Entitled, lazy, self-centered. There's even books about you. The Calling of the American Mind. It's very famous. I actually read through the book. They're known to be bad at taking criticism. It's a meta joke. But they're also known to be open-minded, confident, self-expressive, because they are the first digital native generation. The regular presence of cell phones, I know I had one, Nokia, back in college, iPhone 2007, and also the technological advances accelerated during this period of time. The rise of 3G, 2002, 4G, 2010, the 5G, of course, 2020. And the instant gratification wasn't possible until Amazon Prime launched the 2-day shipping. You know which year that was? Anyone? 2011. Wrong. 2005. Even earlier. It's amazing, right? How long has been. But it doesn't feel that long. That's the interesting part about that, right? It doesn't feel that long, but it has been a long time. Also the golden age of social and video. Facebook 04, video 05, Twitter 06, Instagram 2010, Pinterest 2010, Snap 2011, Twitch 2011. I mean, it's incredible just how much platform has emerged during this period of time. Always on, we're always on, email, text, and so on. Also, but then if we're moving quickly to Generation Z, they're known for I guess, Zoomers. I don't really relate to that as much, but the TikTok generation, we can all relate to that. TikTok actually started in China before in 2016, and because the acquisition of Musical.ly, 2018, has really become a sensation, taking over all of our advertising dollars, attention, and so on. I recently read a study there, average teenagers spend about 3 to 5 hours per day on TikTok. It's pretty scary, actually. I have a few things to say about that. So this generation is known to be open-minded, just like millennials. There's a lot of similarities between millennials and Gen Z. Open-mindedness, more inclusive, more politically activist. They stand for what they believe in. They also know, on the flip side, to have shorter attention span because the content has switched from books, poetry, to memes, to 6-second videos. They're also known to be poor at in-person communication, but I'm glad that we're here now to practice that a little bit more. I think actually many of us become worse at that over the last 2 or 3 years. So from a technological point of view, not beyond TikTok, but also the rise of AR, VR, and metaverse will start to mature during this period of time. So clearly there's a huge differences between the generations. But when I think deeper, despite all the differences, I think all of us share a certain set of universal needs that transcends when we were born, where we're from, geographically, how we're raised. I'll just name a few, right? We all want to be loved. We all want to be respected, trusted. We all want to feel appreciated, and perhaps even admired. We want to feel safe, confident. We want to feel strong. We want to feel stable. We want to have a sense of agency to make decisions that we believe are good for ourselves. We all want a sense of order, some sense of structure too. Not too much structure. Enough structure to feel predictable, but also leave room for wonder, for surprises, for the unknown. We all want to feel accomplished in life. Many of you are here because you want to learn. You want to get better at your craft. You want to open your mind. We all want to live our potential. No one goes to death and saying, I did not want to live my full potential. All of us want to do. And that we all want to believe that our life is for a greater purpose. We all want to feel peace at the end, right? We'll feel content regardless of circumstance. So if you look at the differences that I could have put on the slide and the list of commonalities, I personally believe that the commonalities outweigh any differences we have. So when we look at workplace, when we look at home life, when we look at just data interactions, I think we should look at more of the commonalities, but also adjust for the differences. So what can we do for each other? I have 3 kind of areas. I would say these are more my hypothesis areas. I welcome any criticism or additions. Just not on Twitter. No, I'm kidding. Just you can ping me. Actually, I would love to hear more how you think about them. The way I'm breaking this down is what we can do for each other. The first one is what we can do for ourselves. The first one is actually because of our technological advances and the always on. I think what we all need to do for ourselves first is to create more white space. How many of you open your calendars and you literally see space? If you're in management, many of you are meeting to meeting, beginning to end, catch up. On Slack, I now have a queue of unread messages that I sometimes save, sometimes I mark unread, and I forget about them, and I come back, set reminders, scheduling new messages. It's pretty nuts. White spaces, more stillness. And I think the reason I say I want to mention space first is because without creating space, a lot of things cannot happen. And one of the, we also tend to fill space, if you have space, with noise. You'll put up Netflix, YouTube, platform of your choice. But the reason I want to mention is because I want you guys to imagine, and that's why I describe my wife, sometimes it works, I'll try you guys, that when I think about my mind, it's almost like a stream. It's clear water. You had some pebbles and sand at the bottom. As you read more, consume more, you're throwing things into the stream. It gets muddied. It's a little hard to see through what it is. But until you stay still for a few minutes, until you really stop doing something, does that stream become testing? I'm not sure. Does that stream become clear? Does that clarity start to emerge? And that's why a lot of times I had to take time outside of work or creating new habits that allows my mind to be more at still. Does that analogy work for you guys? Okay, cool. So a couple of things. How do you create space? There's routines. You can read a lot about morning routines. One thing I definitely have encouraged, but these things I have not mastered, so it's not something I mastered, I'm telling you. Something I'm writing this for myself too. So for example, morning, when I wake up and when I go to bed, no devices. Books instead. And I bought more physical books again. I feel like I'm going to the cycle. I read all my books, Kindle only. I'm going back to books because I find that I need to have that focus. Don't doom scroll, right, before bed or when we wake up. Go outside in the morning, even just 10 minutes. It makes a huge difference. You connect with the world. And the last one, I want a little mini challenge. I'm a huge fan of little habits, like Atomic Habits or the book Nudge. It's about starting small. And this, you might think this is silly, but I want to challenge you to do this. When you go to the bathroom, don't take your device with you. How many of you have been sitting on the toilet and sending out messages? Yeah? All of a sudden you're there 10, 20 minutes. You're like, why am I still here? I was done 10 minutes ago. That little thing actually matters, right? Because it's a habit. You cannot even leave, right? I call it doing business while you're doing business. Like, don't do that. So it's a little challenge. I mean it. So I'll move on from that one real quick. Second area. So first one is about space, creating a white space for you. Second, so to clear your mind and get clarity. Second one is to fill that space with skill. And I think skill in this case, the particular skill I'm going to talk about is about the ability to write well, to speak well, to think critically. I probably think about Gen Z and younger millennial because I think the way they learning, the way they consume is very different. The reason I say about these three things is I do think that this is a necessary skill. And good writing takes time. And especially hard if your attention span is shorter. But I feel like as much as we can learn about the various tactics and so on, there's nothing that really replaces good writing. It forces you to clarify what you're trying to convey. It forces you to critically examine the evidence, not just take what's presented, what's available by face value. It could be things reported on news, it could be data on your dashboard. It could be even your feelings. You have to examine your feelings a bit more. And I think this is actually a big topic. It's almost you can just spend 30 minutes on feelings. I believe that feelings are a very compelling thing. And I think social media and all platforms really rattle about feelings a bit more. But I think if you spend time to write, you're forced to examine your feelings to say, is my feeling accurate? What does it mean? What is it telling me? It's not always reliable, right? It can mislead us. It can also, by thinking about your feelings more, examining them, you can avoid a lot of common cognitive distortions that we are all succumb to. It could be about emotional reasoning, right? When you let your feelings guide your interpretation of the world, of the reality. You can be like, I feel depressed today. I just don't think I don't think this job is for me. You could be overgeneralizing, where you perceive a global pattern based on a single negative event. You could be like, oh, I made a mistake. You can say to yourself, I'm a kind of person who makes a lot of mistakes, but you just made one mistake, right? You're generalizing about yourself. It could be about negative filtering. I think there's a big one in today's generation where you only focus on the negative and on the positive. I understand media doesn't really help with that. There's a lot of negativity on media. That's also why I think cutting back and having that space is important. Blaming is another cognitive dissonance where you tend to place responsibility on someone else versus on yourself. So I think examining your feelings, clarifying your thoughts, and also using writing to synthesize different viewpoints is a very important skill. at work very, very much. I really like people who are able to listen to different viewpoints, synthesize them, and say, here's where the various viewpoints are. Is it on a spectrum? Is it perpendicular to one another? Is there some overlap, or is it very different? And also, take the time to articulate in writing, to articulate a complex problem space. It's a very challenging, but a very valuable skill to have. Distill down the problem space into the one question that you can pose to a group. It's a very hard skill. I don't know if you guys tried facilitation. How do you distill it? It's really hard. Very valuable. And last one, in terms of the skill-wise, I want to encourage, I guess it would be all generations, but slightly different depending on generation, but to think longer term. Instead of immediate thing in front of you, not just about your first order effects. Right? First order means that there's an action there and there's a consequence. Think about second degree. Second degree means that for every consequence, there's a consequence. Skills like in this realm would be scenario planning. What happens if we lose one person on a team versus 5? What happens if the metric comes back in this way? Right? Scenario planning requires you to think much further than just first degree. And that's a very valuable skill to have. Okay, and I think I'm running out of time. Let me do the last one really quick. I'll skip actually one point. Last one is about tribe. What I mean by tribe is that I believe there are 3 kinds of people that are critical in your journey in life. The very first one I call the rock. The rock is someone or some people that you can always count on, no matter what the storm is. Right? They keep you grounded entire life. People you feel like safe all the time. People are not judging you. Sometimes it's your parents, your mother, your father, sometimes your spouse, sometimes your coach, sometimes your childhood friend. That rock is really important. Sometimes for people it's their God, right? It's their rock. Having a rock in your life. The second one is what I call heroes. And this one, I thought about this hero for many years, but particularly for Gen Z, I want to make sure I point to, because heroes are people you can look up to, people you can emulate. And I think young millennials and Gen Z especially have a hard time with their identity, right? Because they're exposed to so many kinds of possible identities, career paths, life choices, and they also define themselves largely based on people's perceptions of them, expectations of them. And many of them don't feel like they're enough because they're seeing so many paths out there. Actually, I was going to read a poem, but I'll skip that one. So the important part for the hero is, A, do you know who your heroes are? And I think when you think of heroes, think about different aspects of your life. For example, I play many roles. I could be an executive at BuzzFeed. I'm also a father. I'm also a husband. I'm also a son. I'm also a neighbor. As a manager, Andy Grove is kind of my hero. He wrote High Output Management. Laura Hogan recently, I guess a recent generation one, has come up with a lot of great management practices. As a father, I thought about this. I don't have actually a lot of great father heroes. My father wasn't around a whole lot when I grew up in Taiwan. And I started seeking out more intentionally who is a good role model for me in terms of fatherhood. Anyway, so I think hero, and I think this is also where older millennial and also Gen X come into play. You guys have a lot of experience in life, and some of you may not think my experience is worth storytelling to be told to someone. It is. No matter how little you think about your experience, you have overcome a lot to be where you are today. You actually one generation that has adapted the most to the number of technological changes, career changes, work changes, the most number of crises. I think you should share. Don't have to go on TikTok to share. Just share with people next to you. And actually, I think that's something that we miss in this remote first world, that we don't have as many serendipitous story sharing amongst us, because I think if we do that more and more, there's probably more heroes amongst our peers in our own work life that we can look up to without having to go to TikTok or elsewhere. And lastly, the last group, so we talked about the rock that keeps you grounded. We talked about heroes that you look up to and emulate, and I think this is where Gen Z, be careful about who you emulate on TikTok, right? Do your critical thinking skill to examine if you should follow them. Lastly, I call this group currently termed as invisible hands that nudge you forward along the way. What I mean by invisible hands, because we don't often recognize them when they are in our life. It could be a small thing. It could be like the smile you give to someone to give encouragement. It could be in a one-on-one where you're very prepared. Maybe it's one where you listen instead of giving advice. It could be the book that you send to someone because that topic is interesting to the person that helped them. It could be that you help someone proofread their email before they send it out. It could be that as a manager, you set aside budget for your new employee to fly out to meet the team because you know in this new world, you need to have that kind of setup that's different than before. Little things like that are oftentimes taken for granted. You can be that invisible hand for someone throughout your entire day. And also you can start paying attention. Who's helping you, nudging you forward in the right direction, and say thank you. So I'll close real quick. I believe gender differences is something that we should be aware, but I think a lot of the reporting about them are very exaggerated, and I think that we have so much more in common with one another. I want to encourage us to have more stillness in our life, slow down so you have more clarity. I will encourage you to be better writers, clear thinkers, and learn to speak in public. I also encourage you to choose your heroes very intentionally so you have the right people to emulate. And also encourage you to be invisible hands for others so that you can help them along the way. So cheers. Thank you very much for listening.